My gosh, $100 million, that's so much money. But the MLB made $12 billion in profit last year alone. And $100 million of that profit would equate to 0.83%. I can probably guarantee they spent more fighting covering those medical costs than they would if they just automatically covered them.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for coming back to another recording of Foul Ball Safety Now Talks. I am Jordan Scott. I'm here with Brianna Ludwig. We're just after July 4th, 2026. We're excited to talk to you about Foul Ball Safety Now. We'll be bringing on our guest host shortly, who's going to lead an interesting discussion with us, I'm sure. Foul Ball Safety Now did start back in 2019, seeing something very disturbing on the news. I realized as a big-time baseball fan that what we were looking at was incorrect and should not really be a thing. And unfortunately, it still is. It's 2026, and there's no regulation and there's no oversight, and balls are still making way over nets, hitting people. Bats are still flying over nets and hitting people. So as I was sharing, Foul Ball Safety Now did start in 2019 on morning news when you saw something very disturbing, a little child getting hurt by a line drive. You saw something, America saw something for a few minutes that was very disturbing. And I made a couple of calls, people who I knew and trusted, and they introduced me to somebody named Brendan. Brendan's been with me all this time since the summer of 2019, and we've been following this issue and just reaching out and people reaching out to us, whether it be victims, whether it be baseball players, and still chronicling all things foul balls and bats as we learned. We've conducted some serious interviews with victims, unfortunately, of foul balls, people who've been blinded and even loved ones who've lost loved ones, like Erwin Goldblum. He's been to 7 of our virtual press conferences and he's interviewed with his son one-on-one. So did his daughter, Jana Brody, who wrote a book, a pretty powerful title to a name of a book, whose mom unfortunately was hurt and died at Dodger Stadium. It's called Sit Behind the Nets. Jana came to 1 or 2 of the virtual press conferences. She's also interviewed with us separately. Also, my lawyer's friend, who was a teenager a while back, when she was 14 years old, she was blinded in one eye in New York at Shea Stadium, and she shares with us in an interview that her son was playing Little League Baseball years later, and her son ended up quitting the game, and I believe his mother was making him feel nervous, and an 8-year-old wants to make his mother happy, so he quits. And maybe that 8-year-old is telling his own son or daughter, "You don't wanna play baseball or softball, look what happened to your grandmother." So those people that have been affected, they will pass down what happened to them may happen to you. And we want those people to feel whole again. We want those people to have a free and clear baseball experience. We're also learning just from speaking to younger people over the last few years. Since I started back in 2019 with Foul Ball Safety Now, it was really focused on a few hundred professional fields. But now, since college baseball players are finding me and contacting me and telling me that they have anxiety similar to people can find on the website of Foul Ball Safety Now, the Queens College investigation, which is no different from many other schools. I'm learning that foul balls are associated with parking lots or neighboring fields. In this case, in Queens College, it's a student athlete. He says to me, "Hey, Jordan, there's an elementary school outside the field we play at, and balls are going over the side, and we're worried we're going to hurt elementary school kids." So currently, as far as I know, because I don't think anything major has been done throughout college baseball, that student athletes are going through psychological trauma. They are worried that they could be hurting people. I have a statistic, I call it a new baseball statistic, present traumatic stress disorder. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, but I think I have the license to go there when student athletes are telling me they're feeling concerned about hurting kids. So that's the new statistic. And I think we need to document that. Why are young student athletes not getting to play the game they love free and clear? And maybe it has something to do with the previous generations of all types of baseball players, but their birth certificate speaks that they're a lot older than the student athletes, and many of them climbed to major league level and played Major League Baseball. Maybe they only told their own families about best places to sit or park the car. It's not just inside the ballpark, it's outside the ballpark, where a woman was hurt in Modesto, California. Lawyer calls me. We can see at Exhibit A1 just how many foul balls there are per year in professional baseball, and people don't realize there's 5 times as many more games in the other professional leagues than there are in MLB, and colleges, so many more games going on in college. Probably 900 MLB players, maybe 5 to 8,000 other professional players, but there's about 35 to 50,000 NCAA players. So as we were contacted in Modesto, California a year ago or so when a lawyer calls us and says, "Hey, Jordan, our client was hit in the head outside in the parking lot." It's not unusual, like in Queens College, where one or many balls in 3 or 4 hours are gonna hit the pavement or the car window, and in this case, the lady in the head. And baseball figured it out back in 1913 when balls were going to eventually find the heads of human beings, that those human beings would have a little recourse to get the help they needed. And to finally prevent this from happening, broken bats, regular bats are still making their way over nets in 2026. We got a call from another attorney a year ago, a little over a year ago. We helped them prepare for their trial. This was involving a baby. You could see the bat going into the seats. It was an ESPN game, and the mother turned and it hit the baby. Hit the baby. Bat hit the baby and the mom. And this baby was alone from the moment that bat struck. There was no teen doctor with them at the emergency room. Fast forward 8 years later, they were on their own. They were finding the brain neurologists that on their own, they weren't getting any help from the team. And there was a lawsuit, and the lawyer found us, and America does not know about this particular case. And we're able to go into those proceedings prior to the trial, and we're able to transmit and document, and I assure you the words will be jumping off the pages, and they will be pulling at America's heartstrings. That particular situation ended up in being a settlement, and this baby gets minimal care, who's now maybe in 2nd or 3rd grade, who's nonverbal, and clearly the doctors stated the reason why the baby was nonverbal, grew up nonverbal, was because of the bad incident. As much as the MLB lawyers tried to take down or contradict the doctor's testimonies, and all of that stuff will be made public. So we're excited about that. And news updates, Brianna and I are just finding new things all the time. So we have something called the Less Than 1% Injured Club. And unfortunately, we know there's probably 100 million baseball fans, but we don't think there's been a million people with life altering experiences. I don't think so, at least. But thousands upon thousands upon thousands, there definitely have been. And we find new ones all the time. So it's not a matter of if somebody will be unfortunately struck unknowingly, but it's a matter of when. And just in the last few months, Brendan and we found like 3 people we connected to, and they told us their stories. And some's more serious than others. We want people, of course, who've been hurt to be spokespeople for foul ball safety now. It's easier said than done, but we'll continue showing up to these recordings. Brianna, how are you today?
Doing great, Jordan. This is a super important issue. Hopefully, we can inspire some listeners with this conversation today. So, without further ado, I'd love to invite on our guest host for the day. She is a social media comedy content creator, actor, and writer. Welcome, Melinda Mills.
Hi, Brianna. Hi, Jordan. Thank you so much for inviting me today.
Hi, Melinda. Thanks so much for being available. We're so excited to hear from you.
My goal with this episode today is to share my experience as a lifelong baseball and sports fan in general, and to talk about the importance not only of foul ball and bat safety, which I believe is like just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to baseball, But I want to bring up some other mitigations that I think the MLB could easily implement to help with fan safety. Hopefully, I can get some fans to relate to my experiences at least, and at the most, make them aware of this issue and have them join in on the cause. So, you guys ready to dig in?
Yeah. Wow.
Okay.
That's
Starting off, yes, primarily I do comedy, but I'm not going to be very funny today because I think it's a really serious topic. I didn't realize how woven into my life the sport of baseball has been until I listened to the podcast, and I listened to every episode. And I would encourage everyone to listen to every episode. My husband and his brother grew up playing baseball. We have three nephews who play. My two older nephews, Sam and Will, they play for the Webster Sox. It's town ball in South Metro Twin Cities in Minneapolis. And then I have an 11-year-old nephew, Navy, who's a travel ball player. He plays USSSA ball out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I'm sure most people can remember their first professional baseball game, but I don't, because I grew up constantly going to the Metrodome to watching the Twins play. My mom would get free tickets through her job, but I never thought about net safety, or at least became conscious of my, noticing net safety until after we had kids. So when my daughter Marna was 7, my sister and I took her to her first pro ball spring training game in Arizona to watch the Diamondbacks. And we sat specifically behind home plate because there was a net there and it's just a great view. And then a couple weeks ago, my husband decided it was time for our son Rowan to get his first MLB game experience. So he got tickets to see the Royals Rays game at Tropicana Field. And he went to the MLB website to buy our tickets. And when choosing seats, he noticed a tiny little box that said restrictions. So he clicked on it and it just told him whether or not the seat was behind a net. There was no sort of like warning, foul balls, warning, danger. It was nothing like that. It was just either you're behind the net and your seat has a cushion, or you are not behind a net. So after the Rays game that we went to, which we loved, and we, informed our kids before on the drive to the game, be aware, have your baseball glove ready, don't look down. Things happen so fast. We chose our seats in the outfield so we could have additional reaction time because our son had a stroke at 4 and he's on blood thinners, presumably for the rest of his life. So we took extra precaution in choosing seats that were further out which we would have a longer reaction time. But after the game, I went on third-party resellers, so like ticket resellers, to try to see if this warning was maybe replicated on those sites as well when you're choosing a seat in the ballpark. And I couldn't find anything. So, Jordan, do you think
Mm.
that would be a really simple mitigating attempt that the MLB or these third-party sellers could make when people are purchasing tickets so they can know whether or not they're behind a net and make an informed decision on their seating if they're bringing kids?
Well, I mean, you're finding something and you were looking for something which was important because of your family and the experience. You anticipated a situation where you wanted to take the precaution. So I don't think most people are. And if they were, I think there would have just been a lot more created. What you just suggested, of course, makes sense that things should be known and reminded that you have, options to find these things out, whether there are nets or not. But we don't want to give you the illusion that even behind nets, you're getting a false sense of security if you think that just nets is the fix. The fix is the three of us dedicated to staying on this conversation and getting others to dive in and find out exactly what's led up to now. And once we do, yes, we do have to also include the lack of information that wasn't expressed to us up until today. And then when we know that, then we could say, okay, well, what's done is done. And we could leave that to the historians or guys like Brendan and Jordan, because yes, we will go deeper into that. But we're also talking about right now. And we're also talking about, yes, there is fire in the theater. And yes, even with nets up, with the illusion of it's a fix, does not necessarily mean that at all. And we're just getting started on doing a little bit from a few teams from the 2026 season and just searching and finding posts of self-reported injuries. In 2025, we found 45 people. Clearly, you can see their bruises of games they attended. And yes, balls do go over nets. And it's time, and it should have been in place, but what's done is done. So we're not going to, cry over spilled milk. We will, yes, and we will put it in documentation, but it is done already. We want people to see what they just missed, and then they could decide if they feel offended or not. That's what we do. We produce reading materials, past and present. But present tense, yes, we need to beat the drum and we need to sound the alarms. I'm very grateful people like you who are certainly living the experience of being more conscious, but we want the powers that be, billion-dollar organizations, to finally not act in a way where it's like willy-nilly, we'll just put the nets up here or there, instead of having a team of sophisticated architects, engineers, and designers in place. I don't believe they'll ever be able to show they had anything near that, but it's long overdue. They need to study the data, these teams of architects, engineers, and designers, and they need to put their stamp of approval on why business should be conducted in professional baseball. And
Right.
without that, you're gonna find flaws. I'm gonna find flaws, but there's a lot of things that are above our pay grade that they could address in a meeting, and we
It
can all
could.
then go out to lunch and
Yeah.
then feel like the rub is meeting the road, and they're
Hmm.
addressing all these things, and then we could talk about the game we love and not worry that there's strings and conditions attached to the experience inside or outside the ballpark.
Yeah, that would be great. And another episode I listened to, you talked about the baseball rule, which was
Uh-huh.
something I didn't realize was like in legislation and had been for like the last century. And one thing that kept popping up in my mind, so I used to be an administrative assistant at the Target headquarters in downtown Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I worked in the risk management group. And without going into too many details, there was an issue with sanitary wipes at the entrance of the stores where you go in and wipe down your shopping carts. The
Right.
wipes were white. So if someone would miss the garbage can after using it or toss it on the floor, it caused a slip hazard.
Sure,
So
sure.
Target decided we're going to make these wipes blue. So if someone tosses it on the ground or misses the trash, worst case scenario, they had a warning, to see it because it's blue. Most
Right.
people would probably walk past it, but the best case was a team member or a guest would see it, pick it up, and throw it away. It doesn't matter where you go in life, you always assume a risk in public and private spaces. So, how do you
Mm.
think sports organizations have convinced people that the responsibility of the spectator's safety is solely on the spectator when nearly every other business has a legal obligation to someone injured on their property? Because I'm sure if someone slipped on a spilled beer on the concourse, the stadium has an insurance policy to cover that injury. Or could I be wrong there?
I'm not sure about the slip and falls within the arena, and I'm sure that's common because it's certainly it's a 3 or 4 hour experience of thousands of people together. And yes, there's probably people that will knock into each other or slip from time to time. But clearly, the evidence is overwhelming that there are near misses. Hundreds of thousands of balls are coming at us at crazy speeds. We have something at the website called Exhibit A1. It demonstrates just how many balls there are in a game, but we also address the 14,000 games that are non MLB games. We're talking 2,400 plus MLB games every year, but we're also talking 14,000 other professional games every single season. There's a direct connection to these lower leagues with MLB. There's 30 MLB teams. They have 120 affiliates. They all have four, and they pay the salaries of those 120 affiliates. And a lot of these billionaire 30 teams own a lot of these 120 affiliates. So there certainly is a direct connection. And we know, based on this 2019 report, when Exhibit A, the ESPN video, made its way to the world, we saw this horrific video, stitched threads of serious injuries, balls striking children back in 2019. Part of that Exhibit A video was Commissioner Rob Manfred, very bright attorney representing MLB owners all these years, saying things like there'll be upgrades by 2020, but why didn't it apply to the affiliates, 120 affiliates? And then in 2022, he makes another statement that by 25, that all the affiliates would have extended netting improvements. And why would he make that announcement in 22 and at the same time leave out that maybe you should stay home for 23 and 24? So
Right.
all we have to do is say to people like, hey, check out the Manfred minutes. I think you'll be scratching your head along with us. And we will do that. And that exhibit A1 demonstrates the hot zones. And people are going to then cry out how many of them were going at 100. And that's something that MLB will be able to answer because they've been tracking data, exit velocities for the last decade or two. So the general public should get hungry and get a sense of, I mean, we had gone to these games 3 times a year over 10 years, and that's 30 times. There were maybe some near misses, but we didn't realize those near misses could have been lethal, that kind of thing. Usually when hard balls hit the beer or the popcorn and it explodes, nobody evacuates and goes home. But MLB should tell us, that could have been an inch away from your head.
Yes.
And that's you had no business to be there to begin with. And I think Brianna and others who have babies that are 2, who may have not evacuated and may have not been able to put the 2 and 2 together kind of thing. MLB certainly did know that those near misses could have been the worst experiences of someone's life.
I do think that a lot of it, like, if it started with the MLB, I feel like if the MLB would push more safety precautions, it would kind of trickle down to other ballparks as well. Minor league, college, little league, wherever. I feel like it would just lead as an example, but it feels like they just don't want to.
Yeah, unfortunately, like, for example, the bad incident, which I was talking about in the opening that hit the mom and the baby who grew up nonverbal, bats are still making their way over nets almost 10 years later. So obviously, no lessons are being learned internally. And they're not anxious to deal with this conversation that's still not being addressed. And why
Right.
aren't they just asking for outside help? Because there's plenty of architects, engineers, and designers that are open for hire, and they'd be like, "Sure, yeah, we'll give you our take on all of this, guys."
Oh,
And they'll
yeah.
get and why wouldn't they? They would contract an independent body who would have final say and give Brianna and other families reassurances. This is where you park, no conditions attached. This is how you go in and have a good time, no strings or conditions attached. And if you can't guarantee that, well, then that's another conversation. If you
Right.
can, then you implement it. Finally, let's eliminate the unknown factors about going to the game and the game experience. It could be a beautiful thing, but
Yeah.
as long as there's new unfortunates every year entering into the less than 1% injured club, I got to keep reminding everyone that we've always been in the dark. And yes, 99% of us are going to live our merry life, and our next generation will live our merry life, unconditional, good times, wholesome apple pie, and fun, and attach that experience. It's, once you realize you could have been part of that 1% club, you'll realize and sympathize and empathize, or maybe get angry and say, what the heck? It could have been us. We hope we want to inspire that.
One of the
Yeah.
things I heard when I was chatting with some of my friends and family about nets was
Uh-huh.
the netting is a visual impairment. But when my husband and I were given season ticket holder seats 3 rows behind home plate at Target Field, I
Right.
can't begin to tell you how little I noticed that net while staring at Joe Mauer 40 feet in front of me
Right.
for three
Right.
hours.
Right.
So maybe the concern more for fans who sit further down the foul line, sort of like looking towards the infield, I could understand how that net might be more impairing for their view, especially towards the infield. And I know people will go on, like you said, about how the chances of being hit are so low, but it's like they forget that we as a country will write laws that impact less than 1% of our population, and everyone gets behind it because they'll say even one person affected by this is too many. So, why do you think fans are so apathetic towards the less than 1% of people who are negatively impacted by this on both a small scale, like maybe a bruise or concussion, but even potentially end theirs or someone else's life? Where do you think that apathy comes from?
Well, we're able to, in the archives of Foul Ball Safety Now, we're able to find things that management has said, what you're sharing. And when they feed the masses, when they're asked or they have to bring out a response, and they'll say things like our fan base is telling us they're not interested in netting. I find that to be very incorrect because at the same time they're possessing the knowledge. This data that maybe none of us know, and
I think it's just
that
a, it's
they
a
yeah.
disingenuous statement to say fans don't want netting, because I think in one of your statistics it was something like 78% of people would like to see increased netting. Was that right?
That's one report, yep, that may have been done a while back by may have been an ESPN survey of fans, and maybe it was shortly after that incident in 2019 which got me going. I'm not really sure when that stat came out. I don't refer to that all the time. There's one video that's out there that has like 4,000 comments, and it's actually 80% are in the opposite direction. They're blaming the fans.
Oh
So,
no.
yeah, but at least 800 out of the 4,000 seem to be thinking common sense. So, it's an uphill climb to finally get everyone to demand everything they may have missed. I wanna share everything what they've missed historically, but right now we're in the middle of putting out fires. We're
Right.
sounding alarm bells, and we're telling you there is fire in the theater, and we wanna beat the drum and tell everyone that there's strengths and conditions attached to your experience. I can't recommend one situation over another. I'm not gonna do that or say this ballpark or that stadium is 20% safer. I don't go there. I'm more about, hey, this is what I know. It's unregulated. They're putting out their business operations day to day, and they're inviting us to come in. We're paying out money, obviously, to go for the
Right.
experience, but they're not guaranteeing you anything.
No, they're
And
not.
and I want them to be able to provide a roadmap for everyone. And wherever the risks remain, if that's the society we all agree that should be okay, well, then let there be consensual. I don't care if adults of the right age wanna flirt with danger or death if that's their choice. People do that in places like Spain when they run with bulls,
Oh yeah.
but you can't bring the kiddies. That's it.
No.
You're not allowed to bring the little guys. So, all these things are open, but it's right now all of us just talking, which
Yes.
is terrific, and you're making, impressions from your own experience, maybe more than the next impressionable because you have, clearly, high stakes and, situation with children and
Yeah.
other than that. So, but unfortunately, most people aren't hungry for more on the matter. They're not. They're just taking what they're getting, and how could it be wrong? It's MLB, it's wholesome,
Right.
it's apple pie, and I think that's most of us. But we're excited that you're bringing your knowledge now to this matter with us, and
Yeah.
that's only a beginning of a new conversation that's gonna have ripple effects. So we're so excited that you're part of this with us.
Very privileged and honored to be part of this. I love baseball. One of the other things that I had talked about with people in regards to extending netting along the foul line, which I still don't understand why isn't done in those additional 30 to 40 ballparks. Because like the ball can still go through the netting, right? There was that one woman right over at Tropicana Field, I think it was 2016, that the ball went through the netting and she got hit. But a lot of people talked about it's a nostalgia thing to catch a foul ball. and they would miss that if there was netting there preventing the ball from going into the stands. And it got me thinking of all the nostalgia moments I've had in games throughout my life. But in all the games we went to, I never came close to getting a foul ball, but it doesn't have an effect on how I look back at the games I attended. Like my main memory was being in the Metrodome when they shot the
Mhm.
last scene from the movie The Little Big League. Do you remember that
Mhm.
movie from the 90s? It's like a
Mm,
12-year-old who inherits the twins.
maybe,
So this is
maybe
my
not.
my family were in the
Uh-huh.
crowd again on the third baseline. That's
Uh-huh.
nostalgia for me, not catching a
Uh-huh.
foul ball. But not
Uh-huh.
only that, I feel like if you're an adult and you catch a foul ball and you don't immediately hand it over to the closest kid, you're just a huge jerk. So if you're out there as an adult looking for a foul ball for yourself, go to the store and buy one for $6. But then I also think
Yeah.
about like the nostalgia I had when I was a kid in the 80s. I didn't have seatbelt
Uh-huh.
restrictions. I loved being able
Right.
to climb around our van. I could sit in my
Right.
mom's lap in the front seat. But now as an adult, I understand how incredibly dangerous that was. And we as a nation decided
Uh-huh.
enough was enough and
Right.
instituted safety standards in vehicles and passed laws around restraints in vehicles to reduce the
Sure.
number of injuries and deaths during crashes. I think people just don't understand the impact of seeing their own child or a child they love lying in a hospital bed, unconscious or paralyzed and fighting for their life the way I have, even though it was under completely different circumstances. I think if they had no choice but to witness that, they would never care about the possibility of catching a foul ball again. So I guess my next question would be, how do we shift
Sure.
fans who are against netting for the possibility of catching foul balls just for the nostalgia of it? How do we shift them over to wanting to care more about the well-being and potentially their lives or other people's lives? Could it be something as simple as like attendants handing out balls to random kids after they leave a ball field? Would that maybe sort of
Of
shift their desire
course.
away from a
Of
free season?
course. There's 100 ideas, but the teams need to finally get their PR and their promotion people saying, "Hey, hey, we're going through an adjustment period. Give me 10 ideas by tomorrow," and they'll give you 100. And
Yeah.
yes, it may take a little time. There may be dozens and dozens and dozens of more balls given out than usual. It's not gonna hurt their bottom line, you
No, of
know?
course not.
To give out 100 more baseballs a game, $600. Come on, guys,
Yeah.
figure it out. Once the team owns up to it, we have to get into transitional phase. I want 20 ideas by tomorrow. You're gonna get all the ideas coming from the promotion and the PR people, and there's gonna be no shortage of that. You know, people have brought this up before on these recordings that we do, the Continuum series that we're in the middle of. You know, you could have catches with baseball players, soft toss catches. There'll be more running around the bases. There'll be just so many things that
Yeah.
can compensate. But so we can do that. But it's really about creating a baseball civilized society. It's always been the illusion we were part of the best and the wholesome and the apple pie and the unconditional good times. But in reality, it's not a baseball wholesome society. It's not a baseball civilized society when people are still getting rudely reminded that their experience has always been strings and conditions attached to it. And I think the public will gladly transition into the next phase of it's for the greater good, and that's that. And most people wanna know the truth, and they don't want their fellow neighbor to experience something that nobody wants for themselves. So I think it's just a matter of committed to the conversation and
Right.
also making known, the people that have been hurt. I would expect nothing less than them getting some kind of reconciliation because they should be back to the game too. And baseball's a
Yeah.
wonderful game. It's a wonderful outlet for 6 months a year. Everyone enjoys those 2, 3 hours at night. It's company. It's wonderful. It's
It is.
summer. It's memories. It links generations to generations. And yes, 99% of the people will continue to feel that way, that it was nothing else, but they need to discover this. And yeah, it's about the greater good, and I'll just say that because it's a simpler term, and
Right.
we need to get there, and we need to discuss that we're still in the dark ages, 2026, but we can certainly maintain baseball going forward, but it has to be done in a dignified way, and I'll just keep on beating that drum. till we do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the videos
Yeah.
on your site that broke my heart. I
Uh-huh.
also went on YouTube and dug through tons of other videos, but one in
Okay.
particular that really struck me was when Albert Elmore Jr. cried in a post-game interview after a toddler was struck by the ball he hit. And he said
Yeah.
he wanted to see netting around the whole stadium. And that
Yeah.
reminded me, my first concussion was when I was 23 years old. I was playing in a women's recreational soccer or softball league. It was, I don't know, second or third inning. I was on the second base, kind of had little bit of a lead off. And as soon as the pitch was thrown, I dashed for third. Well, my teammate swung and missed. So the catcher got the ball and threw it to the third baseman, who
Right.
happened to be standing on the back side of the plate. So when I went to slide, my head was in between the softball and the third baseman's glove, and the ball hit me
Right.
square in the left temple. And it's not like this was Kevin Millar, my husband's favorite catcher. It's not like it's Kevin Millar throwing the ball. It's women's recreational softball, but it still hurt.
Sure.
And I don't
Right.
remember what happened in the minutes after I got hit, but I remember sitting in the dugout for the rest of the game with an ice pack on my face and watching that same catcher hesitate with every single throw for the rest of the game. And I was told later that when she hit me, she came running up crying and apologizing, but I didn't
Sure.
remember that. But she also
Wow.
came up to me after the game crying and apologizing and checking on me. And for all I
Right.
know, she was crying behind her face mask for the whole game. So the impact
Right.
it
Of
has on
course.
players when you injure someone, another player, that's hard. But
Yeah.
when you injure a spectator, it's even worse. So do you know of any, through all the players that you've talked to,
Yes.
do you know if there are any or even enough resources for players who have to deal emotionally with having seriously injured or, even though it was accidental, taken the life of a spectator?
Yeah, so it's I this is all hypothetical, of course, but what could the team mental health professionals share with the player once that happens? Like with Almora, what could have he said to Almora that night? And I think there's really only two options, really, and I'll just say it. So one, he could have said, "Of course you're upset. And of course, don't blame yourself. This could have been any one of your teammates. So don't internalize this because this is the game that we've chosen to play, and unfortunately, there's going to be these type of casualties. That's just par for the course. So don't you dare internalize this all by yourself." That would be number 1. I certainly would say that to him. And
Yeah.
then number 2 is, "I don't blame you, dude. Why would you or your buddies wanna do this?
Yeah.
So you need to band together and say, 'We're not gonna do this anymore.'"
Exactly.
Something to that effect, similar to the Queens College student who feels like they don't wanna hurt anyone, and a couple of other meetings I've had recently in the last 6 months where I've incentivized baseball players to organize conferences. Usually, I'll have a post up on Indeed offering something like $50 an hour, wanted, organizer, baseball player, insider, to organize conference with other baseball players. And then it's like a 2-hour job, an hour to organize, an hour to host. And you hear these things on these one-on-one calls before these conferences are even set up, people telling you things like, "Jordan, I don't wanna hit, I have anxiety every time I swing the bat," or, "Jordan, on kids' nights, my feelings really spike," to
Right.
that kind of thing. So, you know, is it time for a national timeout? I said that on one of these recordings not too long ago. Maybe.
Right.
Yeah. It's time for a national timeout. And if
Yeah.
that means baseball stops for a while till we make sure that these young people aren't exposed to this daily internally, for sure. Yeah. Why the heck not? I don't want these freaking young people to experience those anxieties. And no, I don't want anyone inevitably getting hurt. 'Cause
No.
that's gonna happen. It's not a matter if the next person will be crushed in the next days, it's when. So
Yeah.
we'll keep on following that, but we're gonna stay optimistic, and it's not that hard to peel back the onion on anything that you're involved with for a while, like Brianna and I. Brianna's been with me for a year and a half, so she knows all the stories from different angles, and Brendan's been with me for 7 years. So
Yeah.
these guys are dedicating their part-time work to me, and I appreciate that because they bring a commitment to making sure that we're organized correctly.
Corporate sponsorships is something that it like popped up in my mind. It's just because, again, I worked at Target headquarters downtown Minneapolis, and in another role I had, I was on the 32nd floor of the City Center building. So my boss, Bill, his office and my desk both looked out into Target Field. And I had such a good view that I could keep an eye on the inning, the score, the pitch count, all that. And it got me thinking, could we maybe approach this from a perspective of putting pressure on the corporate sponsors of some of the ballparks and teams as well, and not just on the MLB or whoever else? Maybe have them help foot some of the bill, or start telling the MLB, hey, we need to get this done, or we're going to start pulling sponsorships until more precautions are implemented. What would you think about leaning on to the corporate sponsors of baseball?
I mean, this would be amazing if, someone decided to take on the corporate sponsors. I don't know if it's going to happen with simple phone calls and a letter or two, but I certainly encourage that type of work. But there's a deep connection and it comes down to finances a lot. And I don't know if corporate at Target would be interested in speaking with Twins management about it. Maybe that's too pie in the sky, but I'm not saying it's not possible. So I would definitely encourage you as a local Minnesota person. But either way, it's something, of course, I encourage on my website at Foul Ball Safety Now. I think we wrote Caterpillar, which is a big organization. We haven't really been knocking too hard or aggressive on corporate sponsors' doors, but yes, all these ballparks usually have corporate names. T-Mobile, certainly in Seattle, because we're hearing lots of things about Seattle on the website at Foul Ball Safety Now. America saw during a playoff game a broken back going over the stands, into the seats. As they're showing it going into commercial on replay, you even hear the announcer saying, "Yikes, look out." And nobody put two and two together about bats and broken bats making way over nets. So with T-Mobile, is there a pulse of opportunity? Is there any sort of connection to getting the corporation to oversee an initiative to ask for outside agencies? Because that's really what we need.
Yeah.
And once more people learn about this, we shouldn't go from 3 people to the top of T-Mobile. We should go from 3 of us to 6 of us to 9 of us, and then we can go to the top of T-Mobile.
Right.
So, I think I may be looked at as a noisemaker, but I believe my instincts are correct because I believe it's my ins the that others will adopt the cause, and maybe there'll be somebody with immediate influence, like one of our guests, that's going to make an impact. I'll be invited into the association of doctors or lawyers or whoever, and maybe that's when the rubber will meet the road. So that's what we'll keep in mind. As long
Yeah.
as these conversations continue, new minds are coming at this, usually only a few days into this with us, which is fine. And you just happen to have been somebody who happens to be a lifelong fan and has immediate family concerns and
Yeah.
brings a lot of common sense faster maybe than some of the others. But we expect all of us would be open-minded to going to these logical places.
Oh, yeah. There was something you mentioned in your episode with Dr. Anderson about whistleblowers in
Uh-huh.
Japan.
Uh-huh.
And I thought there's like all these additional things that the MLB could implement just to help increase awareness for fans when you're in the game. If you choose to go to the game,
Uh-huh.
they could have signs above every section before you enter, attendance reminding people to watch out for balls or bats at least, which I know, again, you've talked about in another episode, surge pricing seats where they have data that proves this section is more dangerous, that sort of thing. But the whistleblowers in Japan kind of stuck out to me. It's their job. For if anyone hasn't listened to that episode, I would encourage you to. It's their job to just blow a whistle to alert fans of an incoming foul ball, home run ball, splinter bat, whatever. And I know the MLB would claim this would be too expensive to do for every game because of the cost of adding all these employees, their insurance, et cetera, et cetera. But what I notice when I watch games on TV is most of the time the ballparks are not even half full. And in my opinion, it's because there's too many games in the season. That's a whole other topic I can talk about. But the ballparks aren't even half full unless it happens to be like a rivals game, like the Yankees and Red Sox. So you have all these empty seats, and it would be really easy for the MLB as an organization to simply reserve one seat per section because, again, those seats are empty for the most part. And I have fans sign up as sort of an honorary whistleblower, and they get randomly chosen for the ballpark of their choice, and they get a week ahead of time to be notified, hey, this seat is available for you in this section, and you could have a requirement to watch videos on why a volunteer role like that would be so important for the stadium and the impact that baseballs and bat debris have on spectators and that sort of thing. I know I would love to get a free ticket to any game and have nothing to do but sit there by myself with pure intent of watching the game for 3 hours. They could even throw in like a free hot dog and a soda at the seventh inning stretch just as a sort of thank you, or like a souvenir whistle or t-shirt that you get to take home. What would you think of something like that along with extended netting to try to get more safety measures implemented like they have in Japan?
You see, what we're doing is we're brainstorming, but who are we going to share all these wonderful ideas with? And why aren't they implementing it themselves? Again, once the team charges the PR and the promotion department, give me 10 ideas by tomorrow, they'll have 20. There'll be these 30. So you're bringing very great suggestions, all things that create more of a baseball civilized environment, which we're trying to do. But at the end of the day, the ship has sailed and there's fire in the theater. And really, big picture, I think these owners need to get the heck out and new owners need to come in because then
Absolutely.
finally we'll start fresh. And the new owners will be charged with making sure they know everything. And all things will be considered, past and present. And sometimes new owners come in and they retire teams' players that didn't get the recognition maybe they should have deserved way back when. And all of a sudden, the new owner says, oh, we need to remember our past. So let's recognize all these players the previous owners never did. Well, similar, let's get new owners in who recognize finally what was always business as usual and justify why it's time to make the changes ASAP and say that what was done is done and we're not proud of that. Let's move on. Something to that effect. So,
I would love
we
that.
well, me too. And that's my big picture. Jordan, what do you want? Big picture. I want these owners out. I'd like
Yep.
new owners then because
Yeah.
it's happening under
Commissioner.
their watch. What's that?
I'd like a new commissioner. I just think
Yeah, the commissioner kind of dictates what the 30 owners want. So I'm not going to put it all on Manfred because Manfred doesn't act independently. Big picture, he's got to do what makes most or all the 30 billionaires happy. So,
and I
and
really think
yeah,
what a lot of this stuff boils down. So my dad was an investigator and he always says follow the money. That was his
uh-huh.
thing. I think it's one of the most, and I'm going to use the word callous, one of the most callous things on behalf of professional sports organizations in particular is their unwillingness to simply take care of the few people a year who are injured, whether it's life-threatening, serious or not. And I thought, why don't they just take $100 million and stick it in a fund to, at a minimum, cover the medical bills of those injured, their lost wages, the lost wages of their caretakers, that sort of thing. And I'm sure a lot of people will think, my gosh, $100 million, that's so much money. But the MLB made $12 billion in profit last year alone. And $100 million of that profit would equate to 0.83%. So I know they're spending tens of millions of dollars a year just to keep attorneys on retainer, to fight injury and death claims. So I can probably guarantee they spend more fighting covering those medical costs than they would if they just automatically covered them. And I'm not talking about someone slipping on a beer in the stadium. I'm talking about people struck by a baseball or shattered bat specifically. And I know people are going to argue that some fans will claim they were injured, but everything in those stadiums and ballparks is on camera. You can't pretend you got hit by a ball. And I'm sure the MLB would still spend less money if they covered the expenses of those who were injured and additionally proving people who weren't injured if they try to fake an injury. I'm sure they'd still spend less money. So I don't think necessarily it does boil down fully to money for the MLB, because I think they could easily come out and say, we care so much about our fans. We're going to make sure, God forbid, if you're injured by one of our players, we'll take care of you. I think I have a sneaking suspicion that if they ever did something like an injury fund, it would expose their complete disregard towards the fans. It would expose they've known all along that this has been a huge problem, a problem that has solutions for more effective intervention, and they still don't care about it. It would prove for the last century they never cared about the fans who were injured. They never cared about the people who were died, and they never cared about the players whose remorse for the fans, I'm sure, remains heavy on their hearts to this day. So do you think an injury death fund, something like that, could be a good place for the MLB in particular, just to start rehabilitating the image of like, they just don't care about fans and spectators?
The lawyers would never get out of the room with a plan on how to implement within the baseball community. It would be almost like an admission of guilt, like you just shared in
Right.
part of your statement. So they're not going to all of a sudden do like a whole reversal saying we'd like to set up a fund on behalf of all the people that may have been hurt, and we're going to study each case individually and they'll be made whole again, because then it would acknowledge that they weren't doing business correctly the whole time. And also, the MLB Players Union, I'm not going to give them a pass because the MLB Players Union are representing the baseball players. Now, they used to have only like the MLB, 30 MLB teams, but now they have 4 times more or 5 times more. I have 120 teams, so now it's 150. So their rank and file has grown 4 or 5 times, or it's whatever, 4 times higher. And they supposedly negotiated a few times in collective bargaining, asking MLB to get the Nets in better shape. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case at the end of the collective bargaining. But about the MLB Players Union, why isn't their legacy like, hey, they decided not to go to work over that issue and they asked for an independent netting council to come and implement solutions. They didn't go that far. So I gotta hold MLB Players Union also to a stinky legacy as well, because they haven't stepped up as much as they should have. They didn't have to go to work and hit the ball at the babies, but
Right.
they kept on going.
A
And
strike a strike would
that's
do a lot.
that's the well, there's a lot of things that they may not be working. They have a new thing coming up. I don't know what's happening over the winter. Yeah, of course. But on this particular issue, this is the issue that I'm working on about wages and other things they may hold out in the winter is not related to what I'm talking about. They've had every opportunity, to players union, to draw a line in the sand and
Yes.
say, enough is enough. If you don't do it, we're going to make sure we're doing it, because our guys aren't going to be hitting balls out in parking lots and not going to be hitting balls past dugouts where there's exposure or wherever else or above nets, because still, dark age is 2026.
Yeah.
Balls are still making their way over nets.
It's
So,
it reminds me of like jousting, way back when, like the guys' jousts would get splintered and the splinters would fly into the crowds and they'd, take a splinter to the neck and die as a spectator of a joust. And that's still happening in 2026 in baseball. What I really like, what I appreciate about this entire conversation, Jordan, is when I worked in financial planning, we had some guys who would struggle getting, while they're building financial plans for people, they struggled with getting information from financial institutions. And since I didn't come from a finance background, I said, well, why don't you just have the people who are coming in sign a limited power of attorney and then sign a letter to the financial institution to fax it off. And I'm sure they'll fax the information back. And it cut down 3 weeks of these guys going back and forth with financial institutions to just 10 minutes collecting faxes. So sometimes I think it takes someone outside of the situation to look in and say there are easier solutions than what we're doing. We don't have to keep doing the same thing that we've been doing because it clearly isn't working. I really commend you for taking this on. It's a huge responsibility to take on, and to find people who are willing to take this on with you. So I really commend you for doing all the work.
Well, we're fine. Brianna and I and Brendan and I, as long as I have people that are committed to doing what's necessary, we will continue doing that. So
Yeah.
that's exciting.
I have
So,
one last question
okay,
for you,
of
Jordan.
course,
Just one. If
Got
the
it.
MLB were to finally, MLB in particular, if they were to finally get all these safety things implemented and they could guarantee your safety when you go to a
Yeah.
game, what ballpark would you return to first and why?
Well, if I go to a game, I'm defending myself. Would I take a chance? I would. I would know where to go.
Right.
I'm not fearful personally about going into a ballpark. I would be fearful of going into a parking lot at some of these places where one or many balls are hitting the pavement window or people, because that you don't even have a chance. You don't even see it coming.
Yeah.
But as somebody who was not extra, extra macho or anything like that, I would go to a game today if the opportunity presented itself. So it's not. I still watch the games on YouTube. I still put my foul ball issues aside, even though I find things regularly when I'm watching Mets and Yankees on rewind, things like home run balls and things that make you scratch your head, worthy of a discussion when babies are sitting there, when dads are catching balls with one hand and a beer or and then catch and then
I've
holding a
seen that.
baby.
Yes.
You
I've seen it.
these type of visuals, and baseball glamorizes those visuals and stuff like
Yes.
that. Gives people a false sense of security for sure. But me personally, I would go to any ballpark, and I would love to be the first one to say thank you, professional baseball, for finally creating the baseball civilized society that we all deserve.
Yes, Melinda. So, working in financial planning, working in risk mitigation, how would you help people think about the risks that they couldn't see for themselves or that they hadn't considered? And how do you think we can make people more aware of this issue?
I think simply by what you guys are already doing. I think the website is comprehensive, the videos are compelling. The podcast itself, I listened to all 10 episodes. It's eye-opening because you don't really realize exactly how big the impact is, even though it's on less than 1% of people, because I have a less than 1% child who had he's a pediatric stroke survivor. And not only that, but he recovered in 10 days, which is unheard of. But when you're part of that less than 1%, I think anyone can be part of that less than 1%. So just have empathy, let go of the apathy, enjoy baseball, enjoy your family, but make sure you're knowledgeable about the seats you choose. Talk to your kids about paying attention to the game. Watch out for the people around you. If you're a parent and a ball is coming, put your body between the ball and your child. Don't think, oh, I'm going to take away this opportunity for my kid to catch a ball, because they probably, most kids, I don't think, would be able to. So put yourself between the ball and the child if you're going to take your kid to a game. That would be like my biggest sort of advice for people. But I really appreciate you both for having me on here, for giving me something so interesting to dig into for the last few days. It's been a really eye-opening experience, and I look forward to participating in the inevitable Netflix documentary on this subject once it gets in front of the right people.
Well, Melinda, terrific and very nice, encouraging words for sure. It's above our pay grade.
Yeah,
It's above Brianna's pay grade and Brendan and maybe you and I to give people the roadmap on what to experience. Now, you would tell this to your friends today, but you're also giving your friends more information than most people would be able to share with their friends. So that's helpful, of course.
yeah,
But we want finally people that are in a position to make the right sounds about this issue
yeah.
and give us all a free and clear experience of going to the game experience.
It would be great.
So
But starting the
we're gonna
conversation is the first step, and that's why I'm so
yes.
grateful for you for doing this.
Oh, terrific. I think this is a great episode. I want to thank everyone, Melinda and Brianna. And we'll do it again soon, everyone. Thank you.
Pleasure.